this and you want him to move to another place.
I told him we're outside.
So go ahead and do it that way.
Do the camera.
I'm going to get him in line.
So people are coming back together slowly, and 5 minutes or so, then we'll have the 1 p.m. Dhamma Talk. And it's nice to see some new people and some people who haven't been here for 10 or 15 years showing up, coming out of the woodwork. So we'll invite Rick to do the request for the Dhamma Talk.
Brahmachaloka dipati sahampati katanjaliyana diwaram yachata sandidasata parajakajatika Dese tu dhammamam anukampamijam. The Brahma god, Zahamti, Lord of the world, with palms joined in reverence, requested a favor. Beings are here with but little dust in their eyes. Pray, teach the Dhamma out of compassion for them. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Today is June 12th, is that right? It's the 12th? Yeah, that's Saturday, June 12th, Abhayagiri Buddhist Monastery, 2021. 25 years of Abhayagiri honoring our elders retreat. So I've been thinking a lot about elders and different ajahns, different great ajahns that we're connected with, both the Thai and the Western ajahns. And largely that's what causes this monastery to exist and caused it to come about. So it all comes from the Dhamma of the Lord Buddha. So the Buddha being the ultimate ajahn, being the primary ajahn, and then down through history to the Thai forest ajahns, Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Chah, and down on to our own teachers, Ajahn Sumedho, Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Amaro, and so on. So that's what makes this monastery come about. And so for myself, I got here in year 5 of the monastery. So 2001, it was still pretty basic at that time. I think about where Ajahn Kasapo's sitting. There was a power pole there, a leaning power pole that had the electricity going to the main house. It was somewhere around there. And couldn't imagine there'd be a big building here. And although it was planned, this building was planned, but it changed forms many times over the years. And so there's a lot of good stories from the very beginning of the monastery, but then there's the whole middle period of the whole, just like the long slog of building and running a monastery over the years. So it's like there's a marriage, everybody looks at the pictures of the marriage and remembers the marriage, but then after that, maybe there's not that many pictures for the next 20 years. And so we remember the beginnings, but then the middle is kind of difficult to remember. Endings are easy to remember. Beginnings and endings are easy to remember. So the whole, just the grind of the daily life and what was brought from Thailand, and just the daily schedule, following the daily schedule here, and how the daily schedule itself actually changed and people were trying to figure out how to best do it here. Of course, Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro bringing the hardcore Thai forest practice from Thailand, and the Wan Pra staying up on the lunar observance days. And so originally, and Ajahn Krudadamo can interrupt me if I get anything wrong here, that there was a work period on the day after Wan Pra originally, is that right? And the Wan Pra was stay up till dawn. It wasn't end at 3:30. It was everybody stays up till dawn, and then there's a work period. So once the monastery truck was driven off the hillside on a day after Wan Pra work period, then they decided, oh, maybe, because he fell asleep at the wheel, and maybe we have to assess the situation here and try to do something a bit more sustainable. Nobody was hurt, but I believe the truck just kind of went off the hillside and got hung up in some manzanitas. Oh, it tipped over. Okay. So that was a few years before I got here, but it was definitely a story that was being told, still being told when I got here. And then the next one was, okay, so no work period on the day after Wan Pra. We'll take a day off. And then, but then, because a lot of the monks here like to work, so they would still work, and then it became, okay, well, if you really want to do something, no power tools on the day after the observance day. So that became a danger. And then it was something similar at Nanachat happened. It used to be that robe washing day, everybody would come together at the dyeing shed, the robe dyeing shed, for robe washing day and dye making. Robe washing day used to be on the day after the observance day, so after the all-night sit. There were so many conflicts that they changed it to the day before the observance day to mitigate some of the conflicts that were happening. And everybody's really tired and wanting to get their robes washed. Yeah. So then it went to the chanting at 3 a.m., the morning chant, and then everybody could go for a rest if they wanted to at 3:30. So that's the form it was in when I was here, but when I first came. But I know even though that was allowable, Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro were still towing the line in terms of staying up till dawn. And so I remember my first Wan Pra and just coming here as a lay guest and wanting to really do the practice and wanted to be very serious about practice. But then this Wan Pra thing is like, oh, by 11 p.m. it's just so tired. And it's already different and difficult living in the monastery and no dinner. And so I was staying in the duplex as a guest, and at 11 p.m. I went, okay, never mind, I'm just going to go to sleep. But then I went to the duplex, and I was just laying there thinking, God, you can't give in that easily. Just, you feel a little bit tired. So right before midnight tea, I got out of bed and went down for midnight tea. And at that time, midnight tea was in the house. It wasn't in normally we have it in the dining hall now, and later on, when we remodeled our house, eventually we had it in the dining hall as well. But early on, it was in the house, and there was carpet, so you just slide the trays around. And there was only 5 monks and 2 anagarkas at that time or something. So it was pretty small community, easy to have the midnight tea in the house. And then I got kind of my second wind and stayed up till dawn. I remember Ajahn Pasano was there. Ajahn Amaro was away traveling. He was in New York giving some teachings. So this was a 1-week visit that I had, and there was just this one lunar observance day that I had the opportunity to stay up. And I remember it was Lungpor and Debbie. Debbie was also staying up till dawn every time. She was really into those all-night sits and really solid sitting. And so it was Lungpor and Debbie and myself. I don't think there was anybody else in the hall. But I remember around 4 a.m., so we had that morning chanting at 3 a.m. People disperse around 3:30, and then I tried to keep sitting. And at about 4:30 a.m., I fell over. So I fell asleep sitting, and my legs were still crossed, but I fell over with my legs still crossed. And then Debbie said she was looking over at me and kind of wondering if she should wake me up or not. But eventually I kind of got uncomfortable and got up because my legs were still crossed, and it was quite painful, actually. So that was I remember my first all-night sit. And then later on, the all-night sits were incentivized. So this was when I must have been 2 vasas. It must have been somewhere around there that Lungpor Pasano had learned qigong in Thailand at Nanachat or something. So somebody visited, and at England as well. And so there were a few of us who wanted to learn qigong from him. So it was winter retreat. I said, okay, well, I'll teach it after the 3 a.m. chanting every week. Anybody who wants to learn qigong can learn it after the 3 a.m. chanting. And so there was a handful of us, and Debbie was there. There was an Anagarika. I might have been a novice. I can't remember. But Anagarika Adam Kane was there. And there was a handful of us in the house doing qigong, maybe 5 of us. And it was kind of learn a new move each week. But it was really good because then we were very awake. We were very awake after doing the qigong. And then it was easy to stay up till dawn. So it's kind of like you push yourself and do this, but then it was actually really beneficial and made it actually easier to stay up and got your energy going, and you felt really balanced. And so, that's I still do that qigong today. Learning it all those years ago, it's been a very good practice, and something can be integrated into the practice can be very helpful with the sitting meditation practice, and also just for waking up in the morning, it can be very helpful to wake up in the morning and do some qigong, do a routine. I know eventually Lungpor Pasano had to stop doing qigong because of his hip issues, but then he was missing the qigong after a few years of not doing it, and then he forgot it. So then he asked me to teach him what he taught me in terms of the qigong. I remember that was at that was at Berkeley. That was at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. It's kind of one of the benefits if you teach somebody something. If you forget it, they can teach it back to you. So there's all these different epochs of Abhayagiri, all these different periods of time, and it's certainly not a perfect place, but it's good enough. It's good enough for the practice, and it's just like being human. A monastery is it's like a creature that has all these. It's alive and it kind of moves around and kind of like being human. So we aren't none of us match like an ideal of perfection. So we all have our foibles and mannerisms and whatever we come into this world with and however we were brought up. So, but then we try to practice. We take on the ideals of the Buddha and we try to practice with ourselves. And sometimes we can be overly hard on ourselves because our mind doesn't match the ideal. We're not settling into just like going into really deep states of meditation when we sit down, or maybe sometimes that happens. But really what the Buddha's pointing to is awareness. So mindfulness and awareness. The Thai ajahns, they keep talking about sati sampajanya, and this is just super important. This is why a place like this exists. It's for cultivating sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear awareness. So over the years, with all of our attempts to cultivate sati sampajanya, then we build facilities which do that. We build schedules and try to make a community that fosters that. We try to keep that as the central focus, as the main focus. Also, things like patient endurance and generosity, and builds up a certain energy about it. But no monastery is perfect. Like you go to a place like Wat Pah Pong, or you go to a place, like you go to one of these really strict Dhamma monasteries in Thailand, or some meditation monastery, a strict retreat monastery where they don't do any work, they just meditate. And so you might shop around, go to these different places. And I think what Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro came up with here at Abhayagiri is a very good balance of all these things. So you might go to, say like, a place like Wat Doi Dhammachedi. Like all they do is sweep all the time. They're not, what are they doing? And or you might go to a place like one of these retreat monasteries in the north of Thailand, and they're not working at all. They're only meditating, and they give you food through you sit in a room and they give you food, and you might think, oh, that's the real practice. But then after a period of time doing that, people might think, well, oh, there's nothing to do here except be with the mind. It's like, this is really awful. And then try to go to Wat Pah Pong, and all they do is work here. What are they doing? They're not doing the real practice. So real practice comes back to these Dhamma qualities. It's not really, there is something to the externals, but the externals aren't as important as the internal qualities that we're trying to develop. So that's generosity, patient endurance. You see somebody like, thinking of honoring our elders, somebody like Luang Por Liam. So part of our standard here at Abhayagiri is that for bhikkhus, your third vasa, before your third vasa, you get to go away and spend your third vasa elsewhere at a branch monastery of your choice. It could be England, Thailand, Australia, New Zealand, or wherever we have a branch monastery. And we get to spend 1 year. And so I chose to go to Thailand. Many of the monks end up choosing to go to Thailand, wanting to get back to the roots and see where the tradition came from. And so I spent my third vasa at Wat Pah Nanachat, and it was right now the abbot of Wat Pah Nanachat is a German monk named Ajahn Kevali. But when I first went there, it was Ajahn Yanadamo was the abbot, and so I spent my third vasa there and I had met Luang Por Liam here at Abhayagiri previous to that in 2004. So I went in June 2005 to Thailand, and the year previous had been around Luang Por Liam, met Luang Por Liam, and was his attendant, was his upatak at that time when he was visiting. But I didn't yet know, I had never seen him on his home turf at Wat Nong Pah Pong and been in Thailand and really been in that culture, so I was really keen to go. So went, spent the vasa at Wat Pah Nanachat, and then definitely really benefited from being in Thailand, and that really helped me to see the Buddhist culture, especially all the senior monks in Thailand, and especially Luang Por Liam in Thailand, and looking at his example and just being around him. And I just really learned a lot from that period of time. And they have these big projects where a lot of the Wat Pah Pong monks, they get together and they build, say a senior monk passes away or whatever, they'll build a chetty, the monks and lay people, they'll all work together, pouring concrete and doing whatever needs to be done to build a chetty. I remember my first Wat Pah Pong work project that I attended was going for a few days to help pour concrete for the building of the chetty at a monastery called Pudindang. It's one of the earliest, it might even be the first Wat Pah Pong branch monastery, the first or the third or something.
Not quite, but it was
One of the first.
yeah, one of the very early.
One of the very early branch monasteries of Wat Pah Pong. And the monk they were building the chetty for was a Longpor Mahasupon, who unfortunately I never got to meet, but heard a lot of good things, and a monk of great merit and barami. And that's also incidentally where I first met Ajahn Jayanto, was at that work project. He was living in Thailand at that time. He was actually on taking a 9-year break from Amaravati. So recovering for 9 years. Well, he was on kind of an extended Tudong period. He had traveled in India and was living in Thailand in different places. So just practicing, living and practicing and doing traveling. And met him at this, I guess he was staying at Wat Pah Pong at the time, so I met up with him and remember we had to clear rocks out of this field and put rocks into this cart and move them elsewhere and dump them in move one pile of rocks and dump it into make another pile of rocks. And remember Ajahn Jayanto and I were picking up rocks together and talking and chatting. He was asking where I was from. And then I just remember one of my perceptions of this day was the whole Nanachat Sangha, or whoever wanted to go, we went there and I can't remember, we might have just stayed for a day or we might have stayed for a few days at Pudindang helping build this chetty, but it was having the meal, which is about 9 a.m. There's no breakfast, so it's just you have the meal pretty early on and then you have the whole day to work. And so then I remember being really amazed at what they were doing. There was just pouring concrete and moving rocks and passing buckets of concrete up. And Lumpur Liam was there, and he was just also helping out and doing some directing. And then I remember through the day, I was like, wow, this is really hard work, and getting really tired. And then, well, it's almost nighttime, so we'll be able to take a rest and maybe have a cup of tea or something. And so it gets to be nighttime, and then they wheel out these lights, and they don't stop when at nighttime. They just keep going till it's done. they don't care what time it is. So that was so I was sitting down, and then I guess some of the Thai monks, they could see I was pretty tired, so they were bringing me over. They have these kettles of cocoa and coffee that they run around with, and so they were pouring me these Thai monks were pouring me some cocoa, and then they're like, what is he like for allowables? I don't know, what do Westerners like? And they were trying to figure it out, and they decided that they would give me this chopped up thing. It's called sama, and but they thought, I might not be able to eat sama because it's very astringent. It's kind of a strange thing, but it's allowable. And they thought, well, we have to make it better for him. So then they poured Blue Boy all over it, and Blue Boy is this red, they call Nam Dang in Thai, and it's like this sickly sweet kind of syrup stuff. And so it was, that was one of my earliest Thai Nampana experiences. They were all laughing. But yeah, just seeing the Wat Pah Pong monks and seeing how they work together, and it was really hard work, but it was not at all like working at a job. It was way different. It was really enjoyable. Everybody, and there was lay people there too who were working really late with the monks, and yeah, just really enjoyable. And almost like if you could describe like a feeling of boon or a feeling of merit, then and people have so much faith. They're building a chetty for one of their teachers, so people have so much faith there, and really tapping into that was a really important experience for me. But also, so a lot of what we have here, we try to bring that from Thailand, bring that energy from Thailand and transplant it here. So it's not just transplanting Buddhism, but Thai Buddhism in particular has so many wonderful things about it, and we don't necessarily want to just start from scratch. We do want to keep some of that form, and like the camaraderie, the communal harmony. It's pretty unusual. They also at Wat Pah Pong having the first experience of this January they call Ngan Patipat, where they come together to celebrate the anniversary of Luang Cha's death. And that's every January. They usually have a 1 week, like a 5-day to 7-day practice session at Wat Pah Pong, and there will be up to 10,000 lay people camping in the monastery, and you'll just see it like tents everywhere, little tents all through the forest, and they all come in, and there's food stalls set up, free food for anybody who comes into the monastery, and there'd be as many as 1,000 plus monks there, and it's pretty amazing. People coming together in harmony, and then it culminates in a big circumambulation of Luang Por Cha's chetty where his bone relics are kept. So seeing that level of people coming together in harmony is pretty remarkable. It just so happens that at that time, we had this program for the lay people in the early days. It was called CALM, Community of Abhayagiri Lay Ministry. And this was it was starting when I was in Anagarika. So I remember sitting in on some of these sessions and being happy to learn a bit from these sessions. It was like a multi-year sutta study / Vinaya, monks' discipline study / ceremony and lifestyle study. Number of lay people from around the country, and somehow they would, I think at least once or twice a year, they would all make it out here to Abhayagiri, but it was a handful, a group of lay people, maybe 16 or 18 lay people or something. 14 lay people who, Dennis was on that, and there's a few, I don't know if Rick, you were on? No, you weren't on. You weren't connected yet at that time. And so when I was in Thailand for my third Vasa and after, because I spent a whole year there, they had their like graduation field trip, which was a trip to Thailand to visit all these ajahns and all these monasteries. And so they were at my first experience of one of these big circumambulations at Wat Nong Pah Pong. And they set up a food stall. So the Westerners, the only Westerners there in the food stall area, and they were the first Westerners, and I think nobody's done this since, actually, to have a food stall at Wat Nong Pah Pong. And
the Italians have done it, I think, about a year or so.
Oh, the Italian, okay.
They're doing espresso and pizza.
Italians were doing espresso and pizza. So the Calm Group food stall, if I remember correctly, Plurn was also helping them, and but it was Tarania. It was Gloria's Glorious Muffins, something she made.
They ended up doing funnel cakes.
Funnel cakes, okay.
Funnel cake.
Well, normally she does Gloria's Muffins. It
Yeah, well,
changed to funnel cakes.
Yeah, well, it started. It had to get a bit simpler.
Had to get a little simpler than that. Yeah, so that was a big hit with people, and just a lot of fun. So practice doesn't have to be like grim. Like when sometimes when we think of practice, we think of like just killing the defilements and stamping the mind, stopping these horrible mental proliferations in the mind, and just like all this greed, hatred, and delusion that's causing trouble for myself and others, and just obliterating it. And so we can come to the practice and have this sense that it's like, death or glory, kind of very, very grim. And certainly I did relate to the practice in that way when I first came here. But then that really changed when I was in Thailand. It was, oh, okay. That was like a real wake-up call. Like, it can actually be fun. Wow. I had no idea. I remember and trying to get some materials together for this whole 25th anniversary thing. And at first I was thinking of putting maybe some video clips together, but it was beyond my expertise level in the computers. But I was asking around for old video clips. And there's a monastery, a nunnery in Bangkok called Satien Dhammasatan. And I remember this well-known Mechi, white-robed nun, Mechi Sansini, a Thai nun. She had come here in 2002. I thought she came here in 2004, but actually she came here in 2002 when I was a novice. And I remember they did a bunch of videotaping for some show they were doing when they were here, and they were here at Katina time. So it was after the Vasa. And so I contacted them and I said, do you have those old videos? Could you share those with me or anything? And they did find them. They dug up like an old video and then shared it with me, like a video file. And so I watched it, and it's got a very nice interview with Ajahn Pasano, and also it has Ajahn Amaro in Montgomery Woods walking with the Thai people, and it's all videotaped. And it might be the only footage we have of Montgomery Woods, actually. And then it's got footage of the Katina. So I was a novice, and Obaso was a novice. He hadn't quite ordained as a bhikkhu yet. So it was, for the Katina ceremony itself, it was a group of, I think there was actually only 5 bhikkhus for that Vasa, which is the bare minimum for having a Katina. So there was the 5 bhikkhus, and then there was the 2 novices. It was Obaso and myself. And then there was Anagarika Craig Randolph was there, now known as Ajahn Ahingsako, abbot of Chithurst. So he was the Anagarika, just junior to me. And he was there in the video. And but it was fascinating to see this video, just because I just don't have that many memories from that period of time. But I do know it was a period of time when I had that idea of being like as tense as possible, as strict as possible, as tense as possible, and tight. And it always needs to be tighter. And it's like you have like a bolt, a nut and a bolt, and you take the bolt, and it's already tight, but you have to get it tighter, so you're kind of wrenching on it. And so this video, it was at the meal time on Katina Day, and there was a bunch of lay people in the Dhamma hall over there, now the dining hall, and the camera was panning from Ajahn Pasano and just showing the whole community, and it got down to like Obaso and myself, and yeah, I was just sitting there, just like totally. It was just too much. Just looked utterly miserable. And so that was pre-Thailand. It's still, and I do remember before going to Thailand too, and taking leave of Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro, and we do this forgiveness asking and taking leave, and then one or both of them said, when you go to Thailand, you will realize how American you are. And that was exactly it. That was like, wow, yeah, I'm a Farang. That's just how I am. That's how it is when you're a Farang. So it's like trying to internalize. I think I was still young enough, I could maybe internalize some of that and learn about the Thai language. I was really intent on learning Thai, so I remember being at the Vasa, Wat Pananachat. Through the Vasa, there's different alms rounds. One of the things I loved about being in Thailand was the daily alms round. So that's just part of your day. You gather for alms round. You're at the sala, at the Dhamma hall. You prepare your bowls and everything, and you go out. Usually it's right at dawn, go out for alms round. And some of the alms rounds, if you're a junior monk at Wat Pah Nanachat, you get put on these really long alms rounds sometimes. So the longest one was Tung Bon, which you'd be barefoot for the whole alms round. You'd be walking. It's probably about this, not quite as long as walking to Fry Vineyards from here. You're walking down this road, and then you go through the village on barefoot, but then you would walk back through these rice fields, and it was like dirt road, gravel road, as you're just kind of like barefoot and trying to make your way back. And that is paved now, so it's actually much easier now going alms around there. But I remember going on that long alms route, Tung Bon village, and reciting the alphabet. I would recite the Thai alphabet every morning, and that's kind of how I started. I can attribute just the alms round as remembering a teaching of Ajahn Chah saying, if you want to learn something, go ahead and recite it every morning on alms round. And if you want to learn the Patimokkha, recite it when you're going on alms round in the morning time. So you just have that time every day. So I was reciting all the consonants and vowels of the Thai language at that time, and still by the end of the year I couldn't speak Thai, but it kind of started getting internalized a bit. It's actually hard to learn Thai at Wat Pah Nanachat. You really have to be like in a Thai monastery. But that year, remember the Calm group came on their trip in January, and we traveled around, and then I had been living so after the Vasa, I had gone to this little branch monastery, Pujam Gom, and founded by Ajahn Pasano in 1991 or something, and then joined up with got food poisoning super bad, and then 2 days after that joined up with the Calm group coming on their field trip, and traveled around with them. We had a bus, and we were traveling around, and it was just, Debbie was there, Metika, everybody was there, everybody on the Calm group, they were all there. And going around to different monasteries, we went to Ajahn Anan, Wat Mapjan, we went to Ajahn Dan, Bunyawat, and many other places, Wat Nong Papong, of course, that was really the culmination, that staying at Wat Nong Papong. Then I got to spend 4 months in Dao Dam on the Burmese border. Got sent out earlier this is a place that group from Wat Pah Nanachat goes in the hot season, deep into the jungle, the Burmese border. And then got to spend a month at Wat Papong. And that month was very profound for me, because just seeing Lungpor Liam, being around him every day, seeing how he structures the monastery and how things work there. And that was a very interesting time, very good time, that particular month. And that year in Thailand really planted this faith. And then of course I had to come back to Abhayagiri. As the rule is, you're away for 1 year, you come back for your 4th and 5th Vasa. And after the 5th Vasa, that completes our what's called Nisaya, or basic training. So essentially our basic training is more or less 7 years here. Then if you're not a complete basket case, or you've internalized the training well enough, then you're released from Nisaya. You can actually do things like go live with different teachers, live at different monasteries for longer periods of time. So I chose to go straight back to Thailand after that for 4 more years. But so I haven't been here the whole time. There's been chunks, there's been epochs that I've missed. There's people who ordained as anagarkas here who I never met. For example, there's an anagarka, Kevin, who I never met, but I heard people talking about him when I got back from Thailand later on. And there was 2 anagarka Kevins, so I met the first one, but not the second one. There's been about 4 or 5 anagarka Scots, I think. I think we're on the 5th right now. So you get so many people coming and trying out the training over the years. one kind of thing that hit me when I was at Wat Pah Pong was Luang Por Liam talking about the facilities in the monastery. He tends to talk about just very practical things and talking about the facilities, and there's a Pali word for the facilities, and that's the sasana watu. That's the objects connected with the sasana, with the religion, with Buddhism. So when we look after the Sayanasana, which is the dwelling places, the kutis, the Dhamma hall, and everything else, we look after those things. And we look after them because they belong to the Buddha Sasana. And also just any objects, any facilities that we build them for the sake of being able to practice better. So we always keep that in mind. So I really, before going to Thailand, I didn't really have my mind around like what was kind of the ethos around like building things in the monastery. But really coming back from Thailand is kind of like, oh yeah, you hold that in your mind, that's what we're building things for. We're building dwelling places so people can come and have a secluded place in the forest to practice and abide here and cultivate Sila Samadhi Panya. We're building this meditation hall so that people can come here and cultivate Sila Samadhi Panya, cultivate the path. It's not necessarily about just doing the work in and of itself, even though that can be great, that can build a lot of camaraderie, and you have a sense of accomplishment when you get it done. But really it's about making facilities so that there can be a place where people can come and practice and have their needs looked after so that they can focus on the practice. Things like Sila, like people who come and stay more than just a day visit, so people who are overnight guests in the monastery hold the 8 precepts. So because of these facilities, because of what we have, people are able to more easily come here and hold the precepts. And that's actually a gift to people and to the world, making the world a better place through just people coming and keeping the precepts and having facilities where they can more easily keep the precepts. Having secluded dwelling places, this is where people get that opportunity to go up and abide in the forest, be in the forest, be on their own, and try to understand what that's like. What is it like when we're on our own? When we're just completely by ourselves and we don't have to act in a certain way based on being around other people. So how do we act when we're by ourselves and when we're holding Sila? So when we hold the 8 precepts and we're by ourselves and we're not seeking entertainment or looking for some sort of escape or distraction, what happens to the mind? So we go inward with the sitting meditation, the walking meditation, or we might engage in some sort of study of the suttas. The word sutta means thread, or it's like a Sanskrit sutra. So like suture, English is suture. So it's really coming from the same root. So these things are all the building of the facilities, the coming and dwelling and practicing the virtue and the sense restraint. These are all threaded together. These are all connected. These are all like a sutta. They're all connected together. And we do actually need the sasana watu. We need the facilities. So this comes back to that being human aspect of the practice, where we might have an ideal, like, well, the Buddha said monks are supposed to live at the foots of trees. Why do we need this Dhamma hall? Why do we need kutis? But when we actually go and try to do that, it's very difficult. It's a rare person who can actually do that and live outside, live in the elements. Yes, that's the ideal, and yes, we should try that. And at the same time, we're humans, so what we don't realize is that takes unbelievable skill to actually do that, to actually live out in the forest and live outside without a roof over our head long term. To live that way takes real training. That's why we don't even go Tudong until after we're 5 vasas. The Dhamma and the Vinaya, the discipline has to be so internalized that we can live outside, we can live anywhere as monastics. But we need those facilities to really get there. So, of course, the Buddha recognized that, and he even made it against the rules to not have a kuti, not have a dwelling place during the vasa, during the rains. So even if we live outside, we have to be assigned to a dwelling place. Something we do during the Vasa period here at Abhayagiri, we study the Vinaya, we study the precepts. Usually we go straight through the 227 bhikkhu precepts, but then we also study what's called the watas, the kicha watas. In Thai they say call wat. So the kicha wata, the protocols and etiquettes, and these come up a lot in the Thai forest tradition. The acharya wata, how you look after the teacher. The akanduka wata, which is looking after guests. Everything. The senasana wata, how to look after the dwelling place properly. We learn about all those kicha watas as well, and that's also something that's just every year. It's been part of the rhythm, part of the pulse of Abhayagiri, of the monastery. So not only so in terms of a year, we have the winter retreat. We begin our year with the winter retreat. 3 months of retreat period, we study the Dhamma. There's Dhamma readings, Dhamma teachings. Winter retreat crew comes and looks after the kitchen. There's a maintenance crew, and the monastic community focuses wholeheartedly on the practice and on the study of Dhamma. April comes through. We receive guests again, and during that time, there's usually a fair amount of coming and going, traveling, and the activity ramps up in the monastery. And if there's any building projects or anything to look after, that happens during that time. You enter the Vasa period. There's still work, still building projects, because the Vasa period here isn't the rains retreat. It isn't the rains per se. It isn't the monsoon season like it is in Asia. But still, we observe it. There's a lot of rules around it. You have a formal entering of the Vasa. You have the ending of the Vasa. You have the Katina ceremony. So there's all these Vinaya rules around it. So we still observe it. And during that time, we have Vinaya classes. So we study the Vinaya during that time. And the monastic community would sit around and we'd do real life situations, discuss real life scenarios around our rules and the discipline and the Vinaya. How do we, like the money rules, we can't accept money, but there's a lot of different things around money these days. So what happens when somebody offers you a Starbucks gift card, for example? Can you accept it? Can you not accept it? Yes, you can, because it's a prepaid gift card. So it's not actually money. So, but then things like credit cards. Well, no, because it actually is too close to being actual money, and so we talk about the rules in that way, and real life scenarios, modern life scenarios. How do we hold these rules and still keep to the spirit of them? And so, and also you can't, like a bhikkhu can't leave for longer than 6 nights, and he has to have a valid reason to leave during that time. So the community is very stable during that time, during the Vasa period. Then there's the Katina ceremony, which is a big coming together of the lay people and a big offering ceremony. So that Vasa period with the Vinaya classes, then the Katina ceremony. There will tend to be more traveling then and coming and going and visiting elders. Like Longpor Viradamo would make a point of coming here nearly every year, sometimes coming for the Katina ceremony. There's a plan for Ajahn Amaro to come this year for the Katina ceremony, so we'll see if we can make that happen. And then there's the slowdown period, and Longpor Pasano would actually go to Thailand every year in December, and he'd be gone for a month. So that was a yearly thing. Keep that connection going with Thailand, with all of the various energies that Wat Papong, Wat Pananachat, and Bangkok. Just keep that connection going. So that's really like there is a certain pulse to the year in the monastery, and it seems very balanced. You get the winter retreat. You've got that good chunk of time for diving into the practice head first, and you've got other times which are doing a bit more service for the community and allowing people into the monastery as guests. And so we've got these different periods of time we can use. And so with all the memories that have built up over the past many years over Abhayagiri, there is this kind of like pulse that's become established in the monastery. And yeah, it's quite good. And it just builds up over the years. There's just so many people who have come through here at this point, and so many people who have come and gone. Some have come and stayed. Some have come and stayed for a while and then left. And it's very much a center of learning as well. So we try to provide a center for people to learn about the practice. Also, another part of that pulse I forgot to mention was the Thanksgiving retreats. Those were actually happening since before the inception of Abhayagiri. And these Thanksgiving retreats, and I think it was done at Thanksgiving just because that was the only open slot at the time. They were doing it at Spirit Rock for a while, I think. Or it used to be like Spirit Rock, Angela Center trade-off. Okay. Mostly at the Angela Center, but sometimes at Spirit Rock, yeah. And so Kathy, who's here now, managed the last 4 or 5, 6, 7, 3 Thanksgiving, the last 3 Thanksgiving retreats. And Hitesi was the manager before that, right? So that's part of it as well, doing these Thanksgiving retreats, which last year, because of the pandemic, having it in-house and doing it online, kind of similar to how we're doing this. So, and then things change. So we get like Ajahn Amaro was talking about yesterday, he's talking about his leaving Abhayagiri in 2010. And so things change. You think things are going to be a certain way, and then they shift and change. You think the world's a certain way. It shifts and changes, and we move on. So there is that happens as well. That is happening at Abhayagiri as well. So we continue to feel it out, but wanting to keep that intention of having facilities that are here for practice. That's really what Abhayagiri is. And also Abhayagiri is the people. That's something Ajahn Amaro always used to teach us. Abhayagiri, if you want to say what is Abhayagiri, Abhayagiri is the people who are there at any given time. Abhayagiri is the community. So we are Abhayagiri, all of us. And yeah, it's good to think about this. Good to reflect on these things. This is also part of just seeing how we can learn over the years, and how, just thinking for myself, like taking that step from, and it can take courage actually to loosen up and actually be at ease, to actually dare to be at ease, dare to be happy, dare to tighten that bolt, not tighten, don't tighten it, dare to loosen the bolt a little bit, put some oil on it and loosen it, and dare to be at ease. So I'll leave that as a Dhamma talk for today.
Andamayam Dhamma Kataya Sadhukaram Dharmase Sadhu 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 Anumodam.
So it's not quite 2 o'clock. I think maybe if we could have about maybe a 10-minute break, it about 2:05, anybody who would like to do the forest walking meditation, the forest walk, could meet at the bell tower at that time, but people are also welcome to keep sitting or to do walking meditation here in the cloister area. For the forest walk, it's very much like loosening up and walking in a state of ease. And Luangpur Liam himself has actually wrote something about walking meditation. Very rare that one of these Ajahns would actually write something himself and not have his book be a transcribed Dhamma Talk. He actually wrote something himself on walking meditation. And that's just to walk very much at ease and leaving our sorrows behind just on the trail, letting them just fall away, and just being very free and easy while walking. And that's how to do walking meditation according to Luangpur Liam. Take a 15-minute break and come back at 3:45 for the Q&A. with a group that just arrived from LA, and they were watching the retreat in the car on their way up. So even in your car, you can join in online with a retreat. So today's Q&A, inviting Ajahn Krunadamo.
Okay, so this mic working okay? Yep, okay. The first day of the retreat, I had the Q&A session, and there was, I think, 1 or 2 questions, and a few days roll along, and now there's 15. I'm not sure we'll get to all of them, but do my best here. So my answers might be kind of a bit Reader's Digest version, kind of truncated at times. Let's see what we do. Okay. When everything goes the way you want, career-wise, family-wise, friend-wise, and you are about to retire, but you feel a subtle, barely detectable dissatisfaction, and you're not sure why. What specific things should you do besides ordaining and becoming a monk? Would appreciate no broad stroke, quote, follow the Eightfold Path answers. Follow the Eightfold Path. Is dukkha arising from That's funny, that reminds me actually of an incident many years ago. We were helping a little bit to look after a very elderly Cambodian monk, Bhante Dhammawara. And there was kind of he was living at the city of 10,000 Buddhas and being cared for there by various numbers of people, and we go down and visit him. And there was one time when some of his lay followers, not the ones who were really actually doing the actual caregiving, but were kind of kibitzing around what kind of care he should get, and they were kind of arguing over him about whether they should do this or they should do that, or whether they should take this approach or that approach, and kind of disagreeing. And Bhante Dhammawara was just kind of lying there. He was about 107 at that time, I think. He died at 108 or 9. And anyway, they were going back and forth, and finally one of them turned to him and said, Bhante, what do you think? What should we do? And he kind of opened his eyes and said very slowly, I think that you should follow the Eightfold Path. So it was a broad stroke answer that he gave, but it also kind of cut the arguing down, cut it out. So it's actually not a bad answer. But just, the one thing that is notable from this question is that there is this subtle dissatisfaction even when everything is going our way. Career, family, friends, you've got everything you want, you're about to retire. But there is this subtle sense of dissatisfaction. There's a famous quote that I always like to mention somewhere along the line, that there's only one thing worse than not getting what you want, and it's getting what you want. Because you realize that anything in the conventional world, anything found in samsara, the rolling on, even if it's the best of all possible conditions that you can find in the world, it can't ever completely fulfill or provide true satisfaction, because eventually it changes. And that urge for those, even those skillful states, having a good career, having a good family, having good friends, even those move on, change, adjust, and if we're attached to them, then we experience this sense of dis-ease, being ill at ease, because we've lost something that we've enjoyed in a conventional way. And what we're left with is trying to find something to fill the empty space that's left. So the wanting, even on a subtle level, is always there, and the wanting of things to be, different from what they are, creates even this very subtle sense of dissatisfaction. Because if you take refuge and look for stability in things that are inherently, by nature, unstable and changeable, then you will experience dissatisfaction, suffering, dukkha. So really the only thing to do is to start looking at what it is and how dukkha arises, how dissatisfaction arises, even subtle dissatisfaction when you've got everything that you think that is good in the world. It's actually, if it's part of the conditioned realm, it's never going to be good enough. So rather than looking for something else, you start examining what it is that you can let go of, and what it is that you're holding on to, what it is that you're attached to, and you start letting go. And there's a different kind of joy and bliss and peace in letting go rather than trying to get whatever it is, even if it's subtly pleasant mind states or even high meditation states. The true peace is found in letting go. So you just have to start, really orienting yourself to that aspect of the practice and make a commitment to refuge in that starting to, and retirement's a great time to do it, starting to let go and simplify rather than continue to accumulate. Let's see. There's a few questions here that kind of in the same vein. What would be the most difficult thing for you if you were to go back to lay life? And what would be the most enjoyable, fun, nice thing about lay life? That's an easy question to answer because I have no intentions to go back to lay life. So there is no difficult thing for me to go back to if I were to go back to lay life, because I'm not going. I don't have any plans to. And I think my answer to that first question kind of answers that second question of what would be the most enjoyable, fun, nice thing about lay life. Well, this isn't to diss, having enjoyment in life at all, but I spent the first 40 years of my life having fun and kind of just, kind of got tired of it, at least that kind of fun, and it was sort of like been there, done that. I had also similarly, good career, good family, good friends, pretty much anything in the material world that I wanted. Enjoyable, times, lots of good activities, bicycling and movies and good food and oftentimes at the end of the day I would think, okay, well, what was that all about? Wasn't bad, it was enjoyable, but it's gone, and now I have to try and find something else to do that's going to make make it all fun and enjoyable and nice. And then somewhere along the line, I met up with this tradition and Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro and Ajahn Sumedho and realized, these people aren't out having fun like I am, and they seem to be a whole lot happier than I am. So happiness isn't necessarily related to fun in the traditional sense of it. And so, don't... if for some reason I did end up as a layperson, through some force or, some sort of authoritarian government coming in and forcibly disrobing me or something like that, I'd probably try and hang out with the other former monks and sit around and talk Dhamma and meditate and go about that just in different clothes. And similarly, if you could give just one advice, or maybe 3 or 4, to someone who lives a lay life with no intentions on becoming a monk, what would it be? Thank you. Well, if you're looking for, something that's a bit deeper and more sustaining in terms of enjoyment and peace and happiness, then as much as is possible, I just really encourage to make whatever your livelihood and whatever your situation is, to start turning to make the Dhamma the center of your life. You don't have to be a monastic, a monk or a nun to make the Dhamma the center of your life. You can have a very skillful Dhamma-centered life with the people that you choose to be with, choose to be around the right people who are going to support that, and gradually let go of the relationships that don't support that, and then just keep on, focusing your life in that way. And the most important thing is really just surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded. If you don't have that support of Kalyanamita, spiritual friendship, then it's very, very difficult. Do you notice a difference in monks or the monastery and their practice depending on the country or region they are located in? Like more laid back in California and more something else somewhere else? It kind of depends on the monks in the monastery or the monastics, monks and the nuns in the monasteries that they're in and practicing in. And there are a lot of similarities, say, in our particular Ajahn Chah forest tradition monasteries, whether they're here in the States or back in Thailand or in Europe, England, and all the places around the world where we have monasteries. You can, as a monk, you can almost go to any of these monasteries that are in our tradition and practicing in the same way and feel immediately at home, and that it all feels quite familiar. Of course, there's going to be some differences based on location, culture, the ways that we've, in small ways adapted to our tradition is adapted here to some of the Western cultural values here at Abhayagiri in California, and the things that we talk about to the supporters and friends around us kind of sometimes have a different flavor than how you would in Thailand. But I would say that, and then of course if you have different traditions altogether that emphasize different things in Buddhist monastic life, then there will be different flavors. But basically it comes down to everybody suffers and everybody's looking for a way out of it. And so that's the common thread. And with that as a common thread, there's a whole lot more similarities than differences. I was reading somewhere about the Buddha, the awakened bright with splendor, day and night. How do dream states inform our awakening? There's not a whole lot, at least in our tradition, that talks about using dreams or analyzing dreams to inform our lives during our waking hours. There are some references to causes of different kinds of dreams and what different dream states might mean, but very little really. It's very practical. It's just sort of like, some dreams are caused, are just kind of like rehashing of memories through the day. Some are processing certain kinds of information or feelings or problems. Very few, but occasionally you might find some that are sort of prophetic or, prescient, prediction of what might be happening, coming up. And some of them are due to like what you ate before you went to bed. So if you eat, a spicy pizza just before going to sleep, that's going to affect your dreams too. So it's all pretty practical oriented. Some people do kind of make a practice of writing down dreams, waking up and kind of looking at them to see if they can find out anything that might give them a clue as to what's going on in their world. But it's not something that's really developed to any big extent, at least in our tradition. Okay. How do we protect ourselves from others taking advantage of our kindness and generosity? Ajahn Yanako once mentioned that it can happen in the outside world. Some people consider our meekness and humility as weak and try to intimidate or bully us. I just freeze during such times, unable to say anything, thinking it may worsen the situation and be more harmful for me. Yeah, I think that it comes with experience and sometimes some hard knocks, but being kind and generous and having humility doesn't exclude or preclude also having wisdom and strength and clarity and knowing how to see the effects of what you're doing. And if your kindness and your generosity is causing people to try and take advantage of you, then we just have to be aware of that and realize that that's not encouraging, good qualities in the other person by bowing to that or submitting oneself to it and just letting oneself become, or getting walked over. And that, as best as we can, we're trying not to have expectations when we are kind to people or when we give to people. We do it without, to the best of our ability, we do it without having expectations of how people will treat us in return. But it's developing that sense of discernment and realizing that you can still be kind and generous and not have expectations for anything in return. And if somebody tries to take advantage of that, then you have to set your boundary and say, okay, well, I did what I did out of good faith, good intention. I don't really expect anything from this person around it. And they're trying to take advantage of that. Well, I can just, at least for now, withdraw from that situation. I don't have to bow to that. I don't have to support that. I can just, realize that what I tried to do was good, and I'll be the owner of that karma, that good intention. And the best thing I can do at this point, so that that person doesn't create any more bad karma of their own by trying to take advantage, is to just politely set your boundary, and if you need to, you can walk away. But not with any kind of, very important to guard yourself from getting a hard heart and developing resentment. That's no good either. There was another one about generosity. Is it fine to give with the understanding of the law of cause and effect, thinking that this generosity will bring benefit to the recipient now, as well as it will benefit us in the future in a similar way? Like Ajahn Yannicka once said, when we take care of our elders, we create causes and conditions for us to be taken care of when we become old and need support. Also, like when we provide financial support to others as lay people, we will be financially stable, which is our basic necessity as a lay person. Like when one steals, it can make one a pauper. So yeah, it's good to have an understanding of law of cause and effect, and that good and generous actions will, have good results, both for one and for others. In the same, whether it's, financial or taking care of our elders or whatever way it is that we find to be generous and to share what we have with others, particularly in caring for other people. I think it's also important to remember that the law of karma, cause and effect, isn't all that predictable. So, inevitably there's the question of like, oh, well, this person did so many good things and so many, generous and kind things, and they've always, they've never done a harmful thing to somebody, and yet they're now suffering with some sort of tragedy, or somebody did them wrong, and what did they do to deserve that? They've always been a kind and generous person. Or vice versa, somebody who, is doing horrible things, in the world and creating lots of difficulty, but doesn't seem to be held accountable for it and gets away with it, sort of like, well, where's the justice there? Where's the law of karma there? So it's good to keep in mind that indeed, in general, and very specifically actually, doing good things creates good effects, and doing unwholesome things that cause suffering creates unwholesome effects. But when and how and where that all happens is completely unpredictable. The law of karma, intentional action, operates over vast periods of time. So in general, we're not sure of when the effects of our good actions or our unskillful actions will result in, will come to fruition. It could be right in this very moment that we experience the benefits of it, what we call instant karma, or it could be later in this lifetime, or it could be in the next lifetime that the effects will manifest. The law of karma is so vast and complex, with so many different factors affecting any one moment, that the Buddha calls it one of the imponderables. Trying to think it through or figure it out on any specific level will just make your head split open. So it's not comprehensible at that level. But just to know that, it still is still is the law. It's a natural law of karma, this cause and effect. And just, even, it's not only even, it's one of the most important things of these kind actions, generous actions, things that we would consider to be skillful and would create good results for ourselves and others in the future, is to actually engage with them, do them, and then after it's all said and done at the end of the day, go back and review and think about it, bring it to mind, reflect on it, and in that way you're experiencing the results of it right then and there, just by looking back at it through the day, and the good feeling that comes up, the settledness in the mind that comes up, particularly if you're going to sit down for a period of quiet meditation or something like that. Spend a few minutes recalling all of the good actions by body, speech, or mind that you've done. And you'll bring about very good effects right there in that moment just by reflecting on them. You don't have to wait. How do you deal with anger? Different ways depending on what's going on. But I think, one of the more important things is to try your best not to act on it. Action being either by physical action, like causing harm physically, or action in terms of speech, what we say, how we respond to people. That's kind of the first line defense, is to not act on it in a way that's going to cause harm, because oftentimes there is this immediate gratification if you're angry. If somebody does something to make you angry, or says something, or you come up with a memory or whatever, we want to dispel that unpleasant feeling. It's a very unpleasant feeling, and the urge is to get rid of that feeling. And so we learn habits about how we think that will best happen, and oftentimes, we get this kind of quick fix by yelling back, or saying something nasty, or something really clever but very biting or harmful. Or even more strongly by striking out in some way. And that does give a very brief moment of release from that energy, but what you've done is just sown the seeds for making it even worse. You just transferred that energy of anger outwards, and it's landed in somebody else's lap, and you're just setting yourself up for an endless conflict by acting on it. So oftentimes, if it's due to a specific situation or interaction, particularly if you're in the heat of the moment and it's happening right there and you're feeling it, to use your restraint, kind of hold your tongue, and just to be reflective and quiet, and kind of make a resolve to be with that painful feeling inside without trying to expel it onto the other person. And if it's so strong that it's not going to go away, and that you think that you might end up saying something or doing something that you would regret, then it's quite legitimate to just quietly withdraw until the emotion settles down, and to, if you can, muster up the wherewithal to say to the other person, I think right now, rather than responding, I just need to take a time out and let my mind settle down before we talk about this anymore. So I'm going to take off for a bit. Maybe we can come back to this at some later time. So it's quite legitimate and good to kind of remove yourself from the situation if you don't think you're going to be able to deal with it in a skillful way. And then come back, if you can, when the emotions have settled, and you can kind of approach it from a bit more settled place to try and come to some sort of resolution. And then just internally, working with the feeling that comes up in the body, once you're on your own and you can attend to your feelings, is to try and, as best you can, to kind of like not reiterate and regurgitate and, go through the whole story over and over and over again in your mind, which is what we often tend to do, thinking that somehow we'll come up with some sort of solution that'll make us feel better. And it almost never works, probably never works, and that if you can feel and experience the feeling in the body. A lot of our practice is body-centered awareness, and all of these emotional states have their reflection in the body. So just to go and attend to that with a lot, trying to bring some kind of care and concern and spaciousness, lots of space, to that feeling and be willing to bear with it. Be willing to say, okay, this really feels bad, this really hurts. Where does it hurt? It hurts right here, or it hurts right here, in the body. And can I just be with that? Can I breathe with that? Can I bear it without spinning off into a story? And then just give yourself a lot of space and kindness to experience that and let the energy kind of just settle down without trying to fix or analyze or justify or create another scenario in your mind about what you should have said or what you are going to say, because that just kind of perpetuates the feeling. So working with it on a real tangible level. And then, once if you've attended to it in a skillful way and allowed it to kind of run its course and not acted on it, then your mind will be a lot more clear to actually consider how you want to practically, address this issue. Which kind of dovetails with the next question of how to forgive a person who has hurt and done very wrong things to you. Again, if it's in the moment and it's recent, just what I was talking about. But also sometimes we have long-term hurts, and sometimes the people that have hurt us in some way are no longer around, or we no longer are in relationship with them, don't have much association, but the memories are still very strong. And the fact that it's been kind of incorporated into the body is very strong too. Body and mind go together. And it is a very skillful and very compassionate thing to do for yourself, to work on forgiveness, because otherwise you're just kind of reinfecting an old wound and never letting it heal. And I think it's a good distinction to make about forgiveness versus reconciliation. That like a full reconciliation with somebody where it's all kind of like worked out and everything is okay again is a very high thing to do and a very desirable thing to do. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it's not very possible to do. Because you have to have the willingness and the presence of, say, another person to engage in that within a very conscious, skillful way. But if that's not possible, and oftentimes it isn't, then forgiveness is kind of at least a one-sided kind of reconciliation where you can start working towards letting go of keeping that person in your life internally. And kind of discontinuing, say, the karmic connection that binds you to that, because even, you're bound to people that you have a very negative relationship with in the same way that you're bound to people that you have a very positive relationship with. So if you want to kind of let go of that karmic connection, forgiveness is important. And it really depends a lot on who they were, where they are, what they did, as to how to do that. And if it's very complex, traumatic events, that kind of stuff, then often I think, finding someone who's skilled in helping people through that and engaging in a dialogue with somebody who can clearly listen and help you sort things out and help you cope with the unpleasant energies that will come up, as you skillfully attend to these kinds of things. In a way that won't be overwhelming, but also kind of starts to open up and let the hurt come out. So some of these things are best done, in conjunction with another person who has those skills to help out with it, and then continuing on your own with allowing the memories to come up, but trying not to proliferate, trying not to create unskillful thoughts around those memories, but gently feeling the feeling and dropping the story and allowing yourself to kind of feel it in that visceral level without necessarily getting so close that you get absorbed into it and get overwhelmed by it. Sometimes you have to kind of give it a little space and kind of, approach it very gently from the edges and stop when it's getting to be too much. But again, that's, if you're quite strong in your practice, you can take that up on your own in some cases. But if you don't feel quite so confident that you won't be overwhelmed, then best to do with someone who's skilled in helping with that. Okay. I am taken by the idea of volition. Can one enter volition without judgment? Not quite sure the phrasing of the question or the understanding of volition in that question. I don't think of someone as entering volition. But volition in the sense that I understand it and that we use it in terms of Buddhist philosophy or Buddhist teachings, also it's kind of synonymous with intention. Volition or intention is sort of when there is any kind of action by body, speech, or mind. If there is intention underlying that or preceding that or informing that kind of action, if there's any kind of intention or volition, then that is what produces karma. That's karmic producing activity, so that there will be a result. Actions that don't have any intention or volition don't have that kind of mental effect of karmic producing. So the classic example is if I'm walking down a path and I step on an ant and I didn't know I did it, do I suffer the consequences of killing? No, you don't suffer the karmic consequences because there was no intention to kill, no volition involved. But if you see that ant and you think, oh, I don't like ants, and you stomp on it, then yes, you will experience the results of that because there was clear recognition and the intention to harm. So that's how volition enters in with karmic producing activity. And certainly, I'm not sure exactly, without judgment, can one enter volition without judgment? There can be volitional activities or intentional activities that aren't clearly conscious, so that we can kind of feel some sort of there might be a very an underlying tendency, say, towards aversion, and you act on that there's some aversion in what you do, like in killing the ant or something, but you're not necessarily saying, oh, I hate ants, so I'm going to kill that ant. So you're not clearly thinking, but you're still acting with that unskillful mind state pushing you. And it's that unskillful mind state that's pushing you. Then when you act on it, then yeah, there is intention there. It's just that it's not necessarily conscious, in the immediate moment. So there still is a result of that kind of activity. It won't necessarily be the same as if it's fully conscious volitional activity, but it will still be there at some level, at some extent. So I'm not quite sure if that answers the question. I hope we get somewhere around there. I'm probably not going to be able to get to all of these. How to deal with self-blame associated with losing a loved one due to suicide. My aunt's son, who was clinically depressed, committed suicide. Before he took his life, he saw another death in their neighbor's place who called my aunt for help. And also he was getting ready to be sent to rehab center for his addictions. So she keeps thinking if she should not have taken her son or gone to help the neighbor, and also not trying to send him to a rehab center, he would not have taken that action. How to deal with these thoughts and feelings of self-criticism. Suicide is very complicated. There's it seems like today is the day for coming up with old sayings, but this was a saying that I once read in a Stephen Levine book, who he worked a lot with people who were dying, and on the chapter that in this book on suicide, he said, everybody has a skeleton in their closet. People who commit suicide leave their skeletons in other people's closets. So that, that's kind of a way of saying that, when someone commits suicide, they leave oftentimes a very long-lasting legacy of confusion, remorse, doubt, self-questioning, for the people who are left behind, particularly people who are close, because there's always that, what could I have done? Should I have done something different? Why didn't I notice this? Why didn't I see it coming on? Did I do something wrong to support it? Did I, like in this situation, should I not have, tried to send this person to a rehab center? Would they still be alive today? So it goes on and on and on, because there's no space for being able to reconcile that, because they're gone. So it's just very, very difficult one. And again, it's like having to just constantly go back and say, what were my intentions? Were they good? Did I want the best for this person? Recognizing that we can't be responsible or control how everybody deals with the difficulties in their life, and that we didn't wish for them to take their life, and who knows, and just the process of going back and second guessing and rehashing, does that lead to peace of mind? And no, it doesn't. And at some point, we have to realize that just that kind of repetitive rehashing, going back, isn't something that results in relinquishment, letting go, or peace of mind. And we have to, in a sense, retrain our thinking processes to start picking up more skillful things to think about, or ways to think about it. And to constantly reassure ourselves, again, with the support of other people, and sometimes with people who can help you through this process skillfully, professionally, that we can't carry the load of being responsible for other people's actions when our intentions were the best, and maybe there was something that we could possibly imagine that we could have been more skillful. But being skillful is different. We all make mistakes, we all do unskillful things, but that doesn't mean our intentions were bad or wrong. It just means that we haven't had enough experience to be able to see every possible angle in something before it happens. So to forgive ourselves, if there is something that we can find fault with in what we did or didn't do, to realize that we are also imperfect beings, and we make mistakes if we do, and we need to forgive ourselves and move on at some point, because the alternative isn't any good. But just to realize that, it's a very common thing for people who have family members or close ones who commit suicide to, constantly question and to find support from other people who have gone through that. I'll just do one more because it's 4:30. There's quite a few about death and meditation and cremation grounds and dealing with grief and things like that, but I don't think we have time to finish that today anyway, maybe tomorrow. But there's one that says, Ajahn is the knowing, in quotes, awareness, presence, consciousness. Can you say a little more about this? Thank you. Well, it's kind of a more than a little bit, but the word knowing, has different aspects to it. There's a lot of different kinds of knowing or knowledge that the Buddha talks about, and it's all the way from knowing things like facts or concepts that are, kind of on a intellectual basis, understanding things, words and meaning, teachings that we read about and think about and ponder about. That's a kind of knowing, kind of abstract, conceptual knowledge. And then there's other different kinds of knowing that the Buddha talks about, more like direct knowing, like directly knowing, say in the Anapanasati Sutta, the in and out breathing. One directly knows I am breathing in, one directly knows I am breathing out. So really taking that direct knowledge to the bodily experience, not just thinking about it or conceptualizing about it, but actually really directly experiencing some aspect of the body or the mind without evaluation, judgment, proliferation, but just directly knowing it in and of itself. So there's that kind of knowing. There's the knowing that comes with the knowledge of, the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, looking at experience through the lens of Dhamma is a different kind of knowing. And the knowing, the highest form of knowledge is direct experience of the Four Noble Truths, seeing for oneself directly the arising of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and how that comes to be. So these are all different versions of knowing or understanding. And at its base, awareness, presence are aspects of this. Like awareness often is kind of, I've heard this described as kind of like the fundamental quality, the underlying quality of the mind, of the heart, citta. That's its basic characteristic of citta in its pure sense is awareness. Consciousness tends to be, in the Buddhist, consciousness is a very tricky word because it means a lot of different things in the English language. In the Buddhist sense, it's the word that's used most often to translate vijnana. And at its roots, looking back at vijnana, vi means like divided. Jnana is knowledge, so it's divided knowing or divided knowledge, and commonly refers to the knowing in relation to any of the particular 6 sense bases. So the consciousness or the knowing related to visual activity, hearing, taste, touch, smells, and also the intellect, the mind, the thinking mind, the evaluating mind. So it's the consciousness or the awareness that is constantly moving amongst all of those 6 sense bases. And so it is a form of knowing, but it tends to be more specific to whatever sense base is activated at any one moment in time to weave this sense of continuity. So that's generally how more consciousness is used. It is a form of awareness, but it tends to be more specific. So that's just a little bit of a answer on that very broad subject of knowing and awareness. Okay, the rest will have to wait for another time.
Okay, thank you, Ajahn Kurdadamo. And that completes our afternoon session. I'll make a couple of announcements before we do our closing chants. One is that there's this new book, Nourishing the Roots, some new talks, transcribed talks from Longpo Pasano. I don't know if they've all been taken yet from the past few days, but we were able only to procure 100 copies so far, so I don't know, is there still more? Does anybody know? Are they still out? Or? Okay. So if those aren't out, they'll be put out outside for people who've come for the day to take as a reluktung, as a commemorative gift of this time. And also tonight, there being Saturday night, there will be an evening puja at 7 p.m. So it'll be like informal tea time, 5:30, and evening puja, 7 p.m. That's going to be chanting and meditation. There will be Dhamma Talk offered by Lungpa after that. So this evening. So from now until this evening, we'll just leave the Zoom room open, and people can actually stay in the Zoom room and feel like slightly like they're in the hall. And, the closing chant is on page 33 of Chanting Book 1, Verses of Sharing and Aspiration. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava, the Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. I render homage to the Buddha, the blessed one. Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo, the teaching so completely explained by him, Dhammang Namassami, I bow to the Dhamma. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, Sanghang Namami, I bow to the Sangha.